Hey everyone, today is going to be the first video in a series that is going to be looking at the games made by both Clover Studios and Platinum Studios. Obviously, when Clover Studios closed down or was shut down by Capcom, the staff there, including well-known game designers like Hideki Kamiya, went on to form Platinum Studios with many of the same people that had been a part of Clover Studios. And Viewtiful Joe, as I said, is the first part of that, although technically shouldn't be, as it actually predates the formation of Clover Studios, as it was actually within Capcom when it was developed by Team Viewtiful that would eventually go on to be Clover Studios when Capcom wanted to start making new and unique IPs to go along with their bigger franchises, and that was the point of Clover Studios' inception in the first place. But this first video is very much going to be about Viewtiful Joe, and for the most part I'm not going to be focusing on sequel games to start off with. I want to go through their new IPs, as that was what the formation of the company was about in the first place, or at least on Clover's end, and we'll talk about the legacy of the games as well as we get to them and what ultimately happened to Clover Studios once we get to the last game that Clover actually managed to design and produce before their eventual closure and become Platinum Studios.
Head to the go-go, baby! You want some? Well, come and get it.
So, what is Viewtiful Joe? And obviously you've probably now seen video of this on the screen, and you've got an idea that it's a 2D action platformer with something of a rather unique visual style, that being based upon movies themselves and having a lot of 4-4 breaking powers that actually form the backbone of the game structure and design and playability itself. Viewtiful Joe, as what's going to become a rather common trend with Platinum and Clover Studio games, is very much a callback to Japanese anime and mecha designs. It's got a retro look, and there's a lot of callbacks to franchises like Super Sentai and other tokusatsu products within them. But it also has a healthy dose of humour and really high intense twitch-based action to go along with it, which is another thing that the studios are going to specialise on. And with many of the big action twitch-based games like Devil May Cry and such, it's formed at the backbone by the designs and directorial skills of Hideki Kamiya, who's well known for many of the Platinum games that you will no doubt be familiar with. Viewtiful Joe was originally one of the Capcom 5 games for the GameCube, 5 games that were going to be exclusive to the GameCube, and obviously if you know the fate of those, you know that didn't turn out so well. Only one of the 5 games ended up as a GameCube exclusive, one never got made at all, and the other 3 ended up on the PS2. Viewtiful Joe being one of them, with an expanded port that had extras added in, along with a fully playable campaign of Dante from Devil May Cry in Joe's shoes throughout the adventure, with everything switched to be all about him and Trish, and I'll go into that later on as well. But the visual style of Joe is all about looking like it's a movie, because our main character is actually sucked into the movie, as we'll deal with when we talk about the story in a minute. But it has all those effects of movies, and the 4-4 breaking powers you get are all movie and camera trick effects that are used to allow you to warp the world around you. This was produced when the Matrix was at the height of popularity, and doing things like this and bullet time and such were becoming relatively common trends within games, and Viewtiful Joe both uses those same kind of ideas, but takes it in a completely different direction to have both 4-4 and parody breaking effects and things that mimic something more like Last Action Hero, if you've seen the film, where someone goes into a movie and they're aware of everything that's happening, but yet it's still very much real for the character. But knowing it's a movie, like how you very much know it's a Matrix, allows you to bend and warp that world around you to allow it to come alive and aid you in ways that no other character really has access to. It's also ironic as well that perhaps the structure of the game, although being made to look like a movie, actually works more like a TV series, with the 7 chapters in the game equally being bookended as you would like a TV series, and it's just one of those little things where the design in the game ends up being implemented in a way that's slightly different from what you actually think you're being pitched and played. The story of Viewtiful Joe is relatively simple, and it starts with our main hero and his girlfriend Trish in the cinema watching a film, and it's a film showing an aged hero known as Captain Blue fighting off bad guys, as most superhero action films does, and it's a favourite of Joe's in general. But the film doesn't quite go to plan, and although Trish is more interested in having fun with Joe in the theatre than actually watching the film, Joe's quite concerned about how our main character Blue seems to be losing and is ultimately defeated, and with that the film comes alive and our main enemy actually comes out of the film and grabs Trish and kidnaps her and brings her into it. So Joe is brought to follow by Captain Blue and brought into the movie world, where he's told that he'll have to fight to get his girlfriend back. He's given the V-Watch to go along with this, something that allows him to henshin into the hero Viewtiful Joe, and a nice little Kamen Rider callback that Joe puts his own spin on, saying henshin a go-go baby as opposed to the standard henshin. As I said, tokusatsu in general is something that's highly referenced throughout the complete series of both Clover and Platinum games, and this is where it all begins. And Joe himself is a homage to these types of heroes in general anyway. His suit design is more reminiscent to Time Ranger or Power Rangers Time Force, if you're more familiar with that, while the helmet design actually is more of a reference to heroes like Kashan, and obviously saying henshin is very much a Kamen Rider reference as well, and it's all based around that, along with obviously his main character being red, which is generally the main colour of all lead heroes in most tokusatsu shows as well. But along with his V-Watch and power to transform, he's also given VFX powers that throughout the 7 stages as he goes around trying to rescue Trish, he's given that allow him to interact with the world and both help him fight enemies and get through puzzles that you find as you're going through the game too. But the plot starts off quite simple, with the first level being very much an introduction to the world itself, and you're only given one power to start off with as well, the ability to slow down time. Joe within this mode is able to obviously just see everything that's coming a lot quicker and react to enemies as they come in, either ducking or dodging, jumping their attacks in order to gain an opening. And with the power of slow, it doesn't just work as slowing down, but your power is increased tenfold, so anything you do actually land on a hit when you're in slow mode means your enemies will be sent flying across the screen or up into the sky, and will take other enemies they hit with them as part of a little extra when you successfully dodge and counter, which is how the crux of Joe's actual combat system works. Of course, the idea of rescuing Trish though isn't something that hangs around as the main plot incentive for long, as later on in the game you catch up with her only to find out that the actual villains of this place, Movie Land itself, would like to break out of the world, and Trish is the key to that. But it also means in order to stop that, Joe has to do other things within the world that involve not rescuing Trish. He uses the vehicle transport he has called Six Machine. As you slowly work through each of the 7 levels, you meet some of the main henchmen and villains who are looking to both fight Joe and stop him in his quest to not just rescue Sylvia, who's actually more important than Joe thinks originally, being the key to having the villains escape Movie World, but he also has to do damage control in the world itself and ultimately fight to stop the villains escaping Movie World and going on to infect the real world. Overall, the tale is actually fairly simply told, and it's not until the very end of the game that you really get the big twist behind it, and given that it's a movie, it's fairly a predictable twist anyway. Captain Blue was essentially behind it all, and only the blood of the creator was the key in order to actually escape the movie world, and for that reason Sylvia was kidnapped. She's actually Captain Blue's daughter, and as much as that doesn't really make sense in the grand scheme of things within a self-contained plot like this, it's all well and good and fine because everything is played for parody anyway. The bookended narration within each scene explains a little bit upon what happens between each of the levels, as Joe generally has to do a bit of travelling between each of the main things that is thankfully kept between the levels, and not much is done with it gameplay wise. We're put into the best scenarios for action-packed gameplay, and that's generally what the game does best, including hinting at more sequels, as Blue ultimately is talked down by Sylvia and Joe and decides to help, and at the end of the film it's revealed that there's going to be 2 more big threats on Movie World itself, and along with Joe, Sylvia was also given her own V-Watch so that she can help out in other situations and future games. As I said, it's all full of future cliches itself, but it's how the game actually gets there that's more important. Every level features nice little knockouts and parodies to other games and movies themselves as well, and I think the most fun of them are not just the bookending chapters that has a voiceover explaining what Joe's done, with Joe normally quipping back that the narrator's not normally that good at his job, or actually trying to talk about something himself, but in one level as well when he's underwater Joe can't even talk as he tries because he's just underwater, but it plays it for laughs as well as you try to do that. Not to mention of course the other homages to other tokusatsu shows, with Joe getting a big mecha battle when the Six Machine transforms into a mecha at the end of the game to fight another one, and also bosses as well having nice little callbacks to other games too, in particular Alesta, who even playing through the original GameCube version I identified as what seemed to be the sword from Devil May Cry, and in Dante's campaign that's played for full laughs as well, as the sword actually reveals himself to be that, and Dante has a whole argument with the sword about how in Devil May Cry 2 he just left the sword at home and used something else. All the characters in general have this consistent design to them anyway, that they all feel like they're very much out of a Power Rangers or Super Sentai TV show. Joe obviously, Captain Blue obviously wears the same kind of moniker but in blue, and the bosses themselves are very much outlandish and based upon traditional Super Sentai and Kamen Rider monsters too, like the Bat and the more crazy animal based hybrids that you fight as the bosses, and the doppelganger based character who Joe has a nice little quip off about the loser needing to wear yellow as well, which is another thing that up until that point Sentai hadn't really done when it came to male heroes wearing yellow. Of course, the general army grunts as well also have that general monotone kind of look, but have a unique design as well that makes them feel like an army of all standardized monsters and mini mechs that make up the blind enemy grunts that you see in both most games, TV shows, etc. anyway. But it's all about the gameplay, and this is where the crux of Viewtiful Joe makes it great. Viewtiful Joe is one of the most highly regarded games in general across the GameCube and PS2's library for how it really takes the most simplest of ideas and evolves it into something that's really well done. At its crux, it's just a 2D beat 'em up with the most simple of controls. For anyone who's played the fighting game series Dead or Alive, you're going to find a lot of similarities there, with one button to deal with punches and one to deal with kicks, and your own modifiers and powers go on top of those basic attacks. Along with jumping, you can dodge upwards and downwards, which is how your enemy's attacks are going to come at you, either going for a high hit or low hit, and you have to duck or jump those attacks in order to get an opening where you can counter attack as well. And you don't have to use your powers to do any of this, but obviously you're incentivized to get the most out of the game, and your ability to fight back is much more improved if you actually choose to constantly be using these powers. While you have a VFX bar that allows you to use your powers at any point that does tick down fairly quickly, it replenishes itself at about the same rate as well, so there's always a good reason to use it, and if it ever runs out, which you don't really want to happen, you'll just transform back into Joe for a couple of seconds until you retransform into Viewtiful Joe. But there's 3 main VFX powers in the game, and to get the most out of them, you'll need to combine them in several instances in order to progress. You have your slow, which I explained earlier, your max speed, which is the simple speeding up Joe on the screen in order to attack more enemies at once, to the point where you can even make clones or time remnants if you're familiar with the flash of yourself in order to go and attack elsewhere really quickly. With the final power being zoom in, where the camera naturally zooms into Joe and every attack is much more focused and enemies quiver in fear, or at least the basic ones do. And combining these powers allows you to have different modifiers on top. Combining a zoom in with slow gives you the most powerful attacks in the game, while speed allows you to do absolutely super speed attacks with a zoom, etc. And obviously using slow and speed together means you'll be able to move at normal rate within going slow motion as well, allowing you to get through puzzles and other bits and pieces, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's all about how these VFX powers affect the world and the enemies around you, because it's not just as simple as slowing everything down like bullet time. It's actually the whole world is slow and physics are affected with that. If you slow down a helicopter, then you're going to find that helicopter falls out of the air because it's got no propulsion from its propellers. In the same way that anything that's firing bullets at you will find those bullets slowed down to the point you can hit them back at their enemy in slow motion. And these effects are applied to just about anything in the game, even when you're piloting the 6 machine, when the game becomes more like a standard 2D shooter. You're going to find that using those powers allows you to charge up your bullets, making them super powerful, or speed up really quickly in order to unleash a hail of powerful shots at an enemy really quickly. And the environment as well features many chances to use these abilities too in order to help you gain or access other areas too, with gates that are all about hitting the same points at the exact same time in order to get through, the slot machines that you have to line up the slots with perfectly in order to both progress and get extra items and health restoring items too, along with general puzzle objects as well in the world, like propeller stands that obviously you need to slow down to manipulate and speed up in order to go even higher than they're basically going to. And of course, on top of all these extra things as well, you collect beautiful points in the game that allow you to buy from a selection of new powerful abilities that you can get throughout the game, all very much Devil May Cry in how they act and work, coming from stuff like angular kicks, extra motions, and the ability to counter, dodge and restore your health depending on what the situation was. It's not possible to get everything in one playthrough of the game, so you're going to want to manage everything perfectly and really go for the abilities you think will be most aiding in your skills. It's worth noting that no ability in the game is ever needed to order to get through, but some of them make the harder difficulties a lot more manageable, especially ones that allow you to counter and get life back. But if you ever need a bomb to progress, the game's going to provide it for you anyway, whereas having the ability to create a bomb if you want to at any point is handy, and there are a few secret areas, but nothing's ever going to block you gameplay wise. But it is incredible just how much thought was put into the game, both in and out of the main gameplay. Even if you pause, every chapter has a different silly quip that Joe will make if you decide to go off and just do something else which isn't playing the game for a minute, which is a nice little extra that I think many games don't really think of. And as I said, it's all about breaking the fourth wall, which this game does constantly, so having that little reference is just another little extra, along with breaking up the actual levels into more episodic content too. With a nice little chapter bookend explaining everything that's happened up until that point and what's going to happen on the next episode. it really helps to kind of make you want to keep playing the game, which is the important part. And while the game's only a few hours long, it's very much an enjoyable experience from start to finish, as the enemies start to get harder and more strategy needs to be provided, as your proficiency with these skills tends to hopefully improve over time as well. The ways you'll be required to use them get a little bit more complex as well, aiding to you really needing to be not just a great fighter but a good tactician in how you're going to handle everything the game throws at you. There's one later level as well in a submarine that also actually rotates around you, so the craziness of the level design has to actually deal with the fact that you can be running down it in 3 different angles, and all the puzzles and everything can be manipulated in different ways so that you can actually still progress, which is no easy feat, and probably for that reason it's only done once within the game, but it's one of the highlights in the level design. But naturally, let's really call out the art of the game too, because the art, the gameplay, while it is great and interesting, perhaps you could say art is one of those areas that gives the game its identity. It's what the game's marketed on, and it's what makes it great. It has that great movie tone, but an old aged movie tone with the scratching and the film grain effects and the film cell borders that play on cutscenes as well. That all brings it to a whole to remind you that you're very much in movie land for this game. It's a great homage to cinema in general, not just all the little franchises that the game's calling out, but it wants you to know that the creators of this love film, and they've really put that effort into making the game look like that. And at the time there was very little like it. Cell shading was good and well regarded, but not overly popular, and still really isn't as a way to develop games and show off a visual look. But Joe pushes that further by having all these movie effects added into it as well, and the cel shaded effects here help with that aged movie look, as well as giving it a timeless look that allows Joe to even hold up today, and it's only in smaller bits and pieces like the animation not being perhaps as smooth as it could be, and that's probably more to limitations of the consoles themselves more than anything else, that show that the game is actually quite old, and an HD remake of this game could still look pretty incredible, and running it at 1080p on an emulator does just as much anyway. But the ultimate homage to cinema is how the powers themselves, the VFX powers, are all based around camera editing effects. As I said, the slow of the bullet time is just that, with the super speed as well being something that was heralded in the Matrix, and zooming in is just one of those things that's used in many superhero TV shows like Power Rangers, where you'll see those big zoom in, and the striking the poses are all things that are actually used for parody, but also used to great effect in the game as well for the various skills you can purchase. But it ultimately just goes all together to make something that has identity, with the cel shaded look and the characters with their kind of big headed hero design that have all the expressions and the faces and the animations there when you zoom in and you can see them, along with the bodies having strong animated silhouettes so that the action that's happening on screen looks fast and fluid and keeps up with that very superhero comic-y-esque tradition that we've come to know over the decades. And naturally all of this is well backed up as well by quite a strong soundtrack, but more importantly the voice work as well, that really goes a long way to selling the cheesiness of the game too. It's serious when it needs to be, and it's played for laughs when it needs to be as well, mostly from Joe, who likes to make the quips along with all the rest of the serious characters, and naturally that's how it should work, very last action hero, with the main character being the one who's privy to the stupidness that's going on. And Joe does get stupid at times as well, as does the game, but because it's all played for laughs and you all know it's very much comic in this world anyway, it all works really well. And the voice acting itself, when it's not Joe and you're playing a repeat campaign with a different character, is all actually played in reverse, so they didn't have to do original recording, but it gives it almost that Banjo-Kazooie style effect, with all the silly little chortles and everything being reversed really working well. Even with Dante, who does have some original dialogue in for like the henshin poses where he just goes Devil May Cry as a rockin', it's all very simple but played so well because it's just the same audio reused but played backwards, and it's subtitles, which is probably what anyone who imports Japanese stuff for the most of the part is seeing anyway. So again, simple but works well for a game that probably wasn't made on the highest budget, especially the PS2 ports. But really something I've shied away from is that the gameplay in this is actually quite hard, even on the easiest difficulties. Viewtiful Joe is no slouch of a game, and the harder difficulties as well actually take away the telegraphing prompts of where the enemies are going to attack you. So if you want to take a run on the harder modes, you're going to have to actually know what the enemies are doing and how they're going to affect you, and that's kind of the crux of many Platinum games as well, that the games will go on to not just make games harder by giving more life and you less life and taking more damage, but on harder runs, stronger enemies come earlier on, and the whole game is kind of mismatched with where its enemies' placement is, and it all makes for a rather thrilling and strong ending to a game, and replay for a game as well if you want to deep dive back in and go and play it, because there's plenty of reasons to, and just see how well developed your skills actually are at the game. There's a ranking system for each level, and obviously each pass of the stage as well, you're getting constant rankings, and this is something again that goes on between the main action games in the Clover Platinum game series. Viewtiful Joe is very much the base, it's the foundation of everything I think Clover and Platinum want to do, and that's create fun, engrossing original IPs, and for the most part that's what they have actually done, with a few sequels here and there. Both Viewtiful Joe and Bayonetta are all games that get strong sequels, but we're going to look at them another time, because I want to be all about the original IPs, these brand new franchises that take what we've seen from other games and evolve it to make experiences that are fresh and new, and Viewtiful Joe is one of the most well-known examples of that, or at least back in the day it was, as it's a franchise that seems to have fallen apart. The game itself touts as wanting to have 2 big sequels, and it only ever got one. Well, there's a spin-off on the PSP as well as the GameCube and the DS. None of them continue that main franchise story, and I very much doubt we're ever going to actually see the ending of the Viewtiful Joe trilogy. Which, while it is a shame, it's nice to see that Joe itself has been inspired and referenced in other games throughout the series of games Platinum have made too, with nice little callbacks in games like Vanquish, well as you could say games like Wonderful 101 are a spiritual successor to Viewtiful Joe in itself anyway. Ultimately, Viewtiful Joe is an interesting, artistically fun, action-packed game that is probably inexpensive enough that you can go and find on an old console, and to my knowledge hasn't been ported to any current gen consoles yet either, and it's one of those games I hope does. At the moment we're kind of seeing a reinvigoration of Platinum games being ported to new consoles, and I really hope that over time Joe becomes one of those ones that gets a port in some way or form, because it's a great game and deserves to have its wrap up for the trilogy. Ultimately, I don't know if it ever will, but the game is here and you should certainly go and give it a try if anything in this video interests you. Viewtiful Joe is a hard, fun challenge with great voice work, fantastic artwork, and more importantly fantastic gameplay that still have not seen anything else really do, and for that reason alone Viewtiful Joe is an amazing game that I really enjoy even to this day. So grab the PS2 or the GameCube version and give it a shot. And as always, thank you for watching these videos, and I would love it if you could leave a comment, subscribe, etc. Leaving a comment and being a subscriber anyway leaves you in for the giveaway, and you can see some fantastic artwork I'm giving away again in the print, so go for that if you want it, and you know, please continue to just watch my videos if you enjoy them. It's really great to have people coming back and taking little breaks. I'm going away on holiday for a bit, so you're going to have to wait a little while longer for the next video. But aside from this nice little Clover and Platinum Studios projects, I'd like to potentially look at finding something else to go along with, and I've not quite decided what to do yet too, and I'm kind of leaning on wanting to do another big RPG, possibly a Final Fantasy, and I'm open to requests for that, but I'm playing through several RPGs at the moment anyway. I want to do something on Fire Emblem, I'm playing Xenoblade Chronicles, and I'm also playing Secret of Mana too, but I'm wondering if I should just bite the bullet and do every single Final Fantasy, because God knows I've had enough requests for them all, or I could just do individual ones. Let me know what you think, and as always, thank you for supporting me, and if you want to help further, and obviously aside from subscribing and leaving a comment, you can share my videos. I have a Patreon that is there if you want to use it, or I have my art store Works of Ryatta, where you can see all the prints that I make and all the commissions and things that I've done, and you can just see the other artwork I do for people in general, as they all end up on that store. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, and take care guys.